Hello, good evening. Welcome, everyone. I'm Shirley Sue. I'm a dietitian with the Stanford Lifestyle Weight Management Clinic. Thank you so much for joining us today to kick off our Nourish to Flourish webinar series. We're so glad to have you. I'll be the moderator for this session, and this is a recorded session. If you have questions, please add them to the Q&A section located at the bottom of your screen. The speaker will answer questions at the end, and the recorded webinar will be available and posted in the Stanford Health Library, both YouTube channel and in the recorded lectures. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Gina Ringelstein, a colleague of mine who is a registered dietitian and board-certified specialist in obesity and weight management at the Stanford Lifestyle Weight Management Center. Her focus is on practical, sustainable strategies to help individuals build long-term healthy habits. In her spare time, she enjoys cooking, trying new workout classes, and spending time with loved ones. Gina will be discussing the big three: protein, fiber, and hydration today. You will hear about the benefits of these nutritional powerhouses and learn practical strategies for incorporating them into your daily routine. And now for Gina.
Right. Hi, everyone. So glad you all are here today for Nourish to Flourish. This has been a dream come true. A big passion project of Shirley and I's and our whole team with the Stanford Lifestyle and Weight Management Center. So thank you for being here. And what perfect time for this to happen, as it is National Nutrition Month, if you didn't know. So we're going to kick it off with the big three today. And I'm going to have some slides to share with all of you. And that will kind of bring the theme and the content of today to life. So we'll get that loaded for us right here in just a second. All right. And hopefully everyone can see this nice and clear in just a second. Wonderful. Okay. So before we kind of get into all of the details, I will need you to have your cell phones or a camera on an iPad or some kind of smart tablet ready to go. We are going to do some polling. Hopefully, if that all kind of works out, the tech gods above lets that happen for us. So have that ready. We're going to be able to utilize that. And I want you to start thinking about something before we jump into all those details as well. That have you ever had a moment where maybe you were noticing you had low energy levels, you felt dizzy, really tired, just really hard to keep the day going, and maybe thought to yourself, like, what is going on? Now, of course, that could be related to stress, commuting, all of the things we have to manage on a day-to-day, oftentimes what I refer to as adulting. But have you ever thought if that could be related to your nutrition? Could it be because of the big three that we're not getting enough protein, fiber, and hydration? Well, start to ponder that as we spend the next 45 minutes together. And I will try to get to all of your questions, comments, concerns at the end of today, as Shirley mentioned. And so let's start to get into things. All right, so which of the big three do we find the most challenging? So I really want you to think about this. This is a great moment to pull out those phones and scan the QR code you see in front of you. You should be able to go to your camera app on your phone. And when you kind of focus on the QR code, there should be a little link for you to press, and then you should be able to select which of the big three: protein, fiber, hydration, or there is a fourth option for maybe all of the above. So I'll give this about 30-ish seconds to get that going there. And so take a good thought about that.
Sorry to interrupt, Gina. Would you mind switching to non-presenter mode?
Thank you. Perfect. There we go. Hopefully that's a little bit better there. All right, so go ahead and scan that QR code if you haven't already. Which of the big three do we find the most challenging? A couple more seconds, probably counting down on our clock for our polls that we have running. Okay, give it 5 more seconds for that countdown if you haven't determined which of the big three you find the most challenging. All right, and we're ready to find out. So, which one of the big three does everyone here find the most challenging? And there might be some commonalities that either reassure you or maybe even surprise that other people are struggling with the same thing. So, let's move forward to see if what the results are. And hopefully, maybe it won't show up here for us, but surely on the back end, was there any results there for us? Oh, look at that. Okay. So looks like protein 37%, fiber 23, 25% for hydration, all of the above. Okay, okay. So this is honestly, I'm a little surprised. Oftentimes I find that protein is one of the more easier macronutrients to fit in there, but maybe if you selected whether it's protein, fiber, hydration, or heck, all of them, hopefully by the end of our time together, maybe you'll be rethinking about some of these big threes and approach them in a new way. All right, so thanks for indulging me there and having some fun. So to kick things off, let's move on to protein first. So protein, the first part of our big three, I like to think about it as the powerhouse. So when we're thinking about protein, I first like to think about what is protein. Protein is a very hot topic right now. We often are seeing protein everywhere that we go, whether it's the grocery store, social media, the latest article in New York Times, whatever that looks like. But breaking it down, so protein is one of our essential macronutrients. When we think about our three macronutrients, we have protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Now, protein is especially important because it not only is going to give us energy, or about 4 calories per gram to give us that energy for the day, but protein is actually made up of amino acids. And maybe some of us have heard of that term before. When we put these different amino acids together, I like to think about playing Legos. Maybe some of us can think back to childhood or playing with our nieces and nephews or maybe grandkids and kind of putting Lego pieces on top of one another. When you take those Lego pieces or amino acids and you stack them on top, that creates different types of proteins. Now, what's pretty cool about our bodies is we actually can produce these building blocks or amino acids. But what's even cooler is we can only get 9 of these essential amino acids from food. So that just shows the power and the value of how important protein is, that our body can't make everything that we need. So very, very cool and essential to our day to day. And so why does protein matter? When we think about protein and what it typically does, it does a lot of things for us, but it's really important as far as rebuilding and repairing that muscle. When you go and you do any kind of exercise or you're hauling groceries, hauling boxes, you're really putting tension and little micro tears into your muscles. And so protein is going to help repair and build those muscles and make them stronger. And that's definitely going to be something we think about in the longevity space. Not only that, but protein is going to help us support our metabolism. And when we I mentioned, our protein, our carbohydrates, and our fat, protein actually takes the most work to break down. And we like to refer to that as the thermogenic effect of food. So our body has to expend a little bit more energy to break protein down, and that can be incredibly helpful on the metabolism front. And And so that can be incredibly helpful when we think about weight management, we think about trying to curb our hunger cues, maybe even thinking about snacking. And so there's a lot of good benefits that come from making sure that we have some protein in our day-to-days. All right, so now how much protein should we be consuming? This is often a hot topic as well. And when we think about that baseline goal of consuming an amount of protein for the day, the recommended dietary allowance is about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. So just as a general reference, if you're about 150 pounds and you're utilizing this 0.8 grams recommendation, that's about 54 grams of protein. Now, this is the minimum. This isn't the maximum by any means. And what's really great when it comes to protein and nutrition is it's incredibly individualized. So the amount of protein that I would recommend for myself and maybe for you or your friend or your brother would all be a little bit different. Protein consumption can really depend not only on maybe our medical history, for example, if you have chronic kidney disease, what your body composition goals might be, whether we're in a weight loss, weight gain, weight maintenance phase, that's going to look different for everyone. So that's where you would want to work with a dietitian like myself and the rest of my colleagues here at Stanford to really figure out how much protein is best for you and your goals. Now, we know that protein is so great for us, but where do we get all of the protein that we need? And so there's a wide variety of protein sources, and I think variety is really key. We have protein coming from our animal sources, and we also have them coming from our plant-based sources. So you can see some nice pictures here of maybe things like chicken, salmon, beef, some tuna. Also, another hot trend of the season, I feel like right now it's coming back from the 90s, is some cottage cheese and some Greek yogurt. But variety is really key when we come to talking about protein. Now, not only that, but when we're thinking about protein, I like to think about prioritizing that first. So I want to make sure that when you walk away from today, you're thinking about some actionable items, especially if protein falls under your most challenging out of the big three. So for our protein here first, oftentimes, sometimes leading with that at your meals can be the best place to start. So I have a nice example here. If you're thinking about fueling 4 times a day, maybe with breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a snack, and leading with that protein choice first. So for example, maybe you do an egg scramble in the morning. For lunchtime, you're going to dice up some of that chicken breast and throw it in a wrap. In the afternoon, when you're kind of ready to have a little bit of a snack, maybe reaching for a mozzarella string cheese, and then wrapping up the day with some ground turkey for some turkey tacos. And so those are some ways we can think about utilizing our protein at our fuelings. And not only are we just thinking about protein, but we want to choose high quality protein. And that's going to be really important. And what I mean by that is choosing lean cuts. And so when you're grocery shopping, some things you might want to stay on the lookout for, as far as maybe you're thinking, Gina, I have no idea how to look for lean cuts of protein. What does that even mean? So what I would have you look for is 93% and above when you're looking at ground options. So 93% or higher for ground turkey or ground chicken. If maybe you're looking for beef or pork and you're trying to be conscious of the fat content, looking for the buzzwords loin or top. For example, beef tenderloin or beef top sirloin or even a pork tenderloin. Those buzzwords of loin and top refer to that being a leaner cut of protein. So that can help you when you're doing any kind of shopping. And so hopefully this is kind of getting you thinking about when you're even at the grocery store, looking at a variety of proteins. And I like this little portion size example here as well, because we of course know that protein is great. We're talking about the recommended dietary allowance of 0.8 grams and potentially and likely needing more than what that baseline is. But how do we know, right? And maybe we're not in a place where we want to track everything that we eat, or we don't have time to really measure and weigh out everything, or we simply don't feel that that works best for us. And I like to think about using your hands to kind of give you a baseline guide. So for all of our animal proteins, typically, if you think about 1 ounce of animal protein, that's going to give us about 7 grams of protein. So keep that in mind. And as you can see here in this example, if you think about your palm, I have a little bit smaller of hands here, but generally speaking, this palm size reference is about 3 to 4 ounces. So if I'm at my friend's house for a barbecue and I have some grilled chicken on my plate and I'm trying to gauge how much protein I've had, and I kind of take out my palm as that guide, if I know that 1 ounce gives me 7 grams and my palm is about 4 ounces, then I know 4 times 7 is going to give me 28 grams. And that can be a really nice way to help you just start mentally observing your protein portion sizes and if protein's even on your plate when you're deciding to fuel up. Now, we can't forget about our wonderful plant-based protein sources. These are incredibly important because not only do they give us some protein, but oftentimes they're giving us a little bit more, which makes them the true powerhouse of the protein overall or arching goal there. And so with our plant-based protein options here, this is going to include things like our soy products, so tofu, edamame, some tempeh, a variety of beans, peas, etc. So just incorporating all of these is not only going to give you protein, but also going to give you some fiber and additional essential nutrients like iron and zinc and magnesium, etc. And so when you're choosing a lot of these plant-based proteins, I often say looking for color, and you can kind of see that in some of the images I have up here. And just out of curiosity, has anyone heard of pulses before? Pulses, like when you take your pulse? And this might be a fun little hot topic. Ooh, we see some hand raises. I love that. That's awesome. Maybe this is something that you've never heard of before, but maybe at your next dinner party, you're going to be asking about if someone's been eating lots of pulses lately. And essentially what that is referring to is all of the seeds of these different plant-based proteins that end up in these little pods. So thinking about all of our variety of beans and lentils, those actually are found inside pods, and we pop out the seeds in the pods and we eat them. So kind of a fun little thing. If you go and Google pulses, you'll see lots of information about that. So just a fun little tidbit there. Now, additionally, when you're looking at our list of protein sources here, you might notice that the portion size is a little bit bigger for these in comparison to our animal-based proteins. And that's typically because when you're consuming more of your plant-based proteins, they have a lower protein concentration, so you have to eat just a little bit more of them. And that's just something to be aware of when you're creating that balance. And in comparison, the amount of protein you see here for the day, this is about 67 grams of protein, where in comparison to my animal-based proteins, we were a little bit higher with that 70 grams. So just kind of showing you a little bit of difference between still meeting your goals, but differences in portion sizes. And of course, when we're talking about all of our protein options, we can't forget protein supplements. Those definitely have a time and a place and can be incredibly convenient when you're not able to make every meal from scratch, or maybe you're running out the door and you haven't had time to make that tofu scramble for breakfast, or maybe you haven't had a moment to put some cottage cheese together with some fruit. Protein supplements, whether it's a protein powder or a ready to drink option, can be incredibly helpful. So just some things to think about is that we're not going for making everything from scratch, farm to table. We're really trying to ask ourselves, how can I get protein on the plate? How can I increase the variety and make it fun? And sometimes I'm going to have to use a supplement to go and head out the door. So that's kind of wrapping up the first part of our big three. So that protein step. All right, now heading into the second part of the big three, fiber. Fiber is probably one of my favorite pieces of the equation. Fiber is not sexy. It is not something we all want to load up on oftentimes. And that's where there's a lot of times we are thinking more about protein and other foods on our plate, but fiber is so incredibly important. And just like we're showing here, it is truly the gut and satiety hero. Before we jump into all the benefits that fiber can have for us, we really need to think about what is fiber. And so fiber is actually a type of carbohydrate that is really challenging for us to break down in comparison to something like protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And so with these types of indigestible fibers or carbohydrates, they really do provide a lot of benefits, but there's multiple types of fibers to make it more confusing. And when we think about our two strong fiber types, we have soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. When I think about soluble fiber, I like to think about a sponge, that if you were to add soluble fiber into a cup of water, it would soak up all of that water, creating a gel-like formation. That's going to be really helpful as far as keeping your bowel movements going, your digestive tract along, and that's going to be something to kind of keep that in your back of your mind when you're thinking about different types of soluble fiber. And so we're getting soluble fiber from things like carrots, apples, oats, avocado, some chia seeds, one of my personal favorites. If you've ever added chia seeds to a cup of water, let that hang out and soak up. That's definitely that representation of that gel-like formation happening. Now, on the other flip side of things, when we think about insoluble fiber, I want you to think of a broom, kind of like that sweeping motion you typically make if you're cleaning up the kitchen. That's exactly what insoluble fiber helps to do. It kind of helps to bulk up the stools and sweeps things along throughout the digestive tract. And those are going to be sources of things like nuts and seeds, a lot of our vegetables, our fiber and vegetable peels, a lot of our whole grains. And so it's just really nice to know that And a lot of things that you consume, whether it's a vegetable or not, you're probably getting hidden sources of fiber, like our beans, our whole grains, our lentils, etc. That's one of the first things I often hear when talking about fiber with people is, does that mean I have to eat vegetables? And yes, I'd ideally love you to get to that place one day. We don't have to start there. There's lots of other ways that we can actually incorporate fiber into your day to day. So I gave it away a little bit already, but as far as why fiber matters, it's going to be really helpful for supporting digestion. It's also going to be great for optimizing blood sugar control. When you add fiber into the equation, especially when you're consuming carbohydrates, fiber takes a lot more effort to break down. So when you pair that with your carbohydrate that naturally is broken down easily, putting that together kind of slows that digestion, keeps you fuller longer, which is great for boosting satiety. So lots of really great benefits there as far as what fiber is going to help us do. Fiber is also going to be beneficial for heart health as that fiber typically attaches to cholesterol, excretes it out of the body, and that's going to keep our hearts nice and healthy. So if I haven't convinced you yet that fiber is something we can be adding to our plates, hopefully this is doing the trick there. Now, how much fiber? Now, fiber can be tricky, but on a general basis, the recommended dietary allowance for women is 25 grams and for men about 38 grams. Now, most Americans are not getting close to this amount of fiber. We often tend to do really well with carbohydrates, fat, and protein, and fiber tends to struggle. Like I said, it's not the most appealing on the plate sometimes, or maybe we have bad memories from childhood of our moms trying to give us the vegetables we just didn't love. And so hopefully when we're thinking about incorporating a little bit more fiber, I want you to think about starting small and including variety. And so to think more about that, when you're introducing a little bit more fiber into your diet, low and slow is typically what I recommend. If you were consuming a minimal amount of fiber and then drastically increased it to the 25 to 38 grams, which is great, you might not feel so well. And that might deter you from not consuming as much fiber. A lot of times when we drastically increase that fiber consumption, that can create a lot of gas, bloating, discomfort, maybe even a little bit of constipation if we're not drinking enough hydration. So lots of things to kind of think about there. And that's by no means to make you fearful of adding fiber, but I like to focus on fiber sprinkles first. So really viewing fiber as a sprinkle or a garnish to your meal, and then eventually working that way up to a little bit bigger of portion, and then eventually ideally having half of your plate filled with some fiber. That's going to be really beneficial. And oftentimes the more color you have, the different fiber types we're incorporating, and making that really, really fun. Now you can see here we have a picture of a label. And so when we're thinking about ways to get more fiber in, that doesn't necessarily equate to vegetables or fruits. We want to think about our whole grains. Maybe if we're thinking about toast in the morning, maybe a sandwich at nighttime, maybe we love to have peanut butter and toast as a snack, lots of different options there. But I really want you to get the most bang for your buck when it's talking about whole grain products that you'll buy at the grocery store. So for this label that you see here, what I typically recommend when trying to optimize your fiber intake and being thoughtful about the products you're buying, I like to use something called the guide of 3 and 5. So essentially what that means is you're looking for 3 grams of fiber per serving, 3 grams of protein per serving, and 5 grams of sugar or less ideally. So if we start at the top of this nutrition facts label here for this delicious whole grain 21 seed Dave's Killer Bread, a very popular brand. So we know that the serving size is 1 slice. That's always really important to start right there so you know everything below it is pertaining to that 1 slice of bread. So if we look at the serving size, we have our 1 slice. We move our way down to dietary fiber and we're looking for 3 or more. This checks that box of giving us 5 grams of fiber. Who knew you could get 5 grams of fiber in 1 slice of bread? That's amazing. That's going to slowly help you get up to that 25 or 38 grams of fiber per day goal. Amazing. Now let's keep going to make sure this meets the guide of 3 and 5. So dietary fiber, check, 3 grams and above, awesome. Protein, 3 and above, yes, we're right at a 5 grams, also amazing. And then checking in on those sugars, it's right at those 5 grams. So this would be a really great choice. And you can utilize this same guide of 3 and 5 when you're purchasing other bread products. So maybe things like tortillas or wraps, English muffins, even cereals, granolas. That can be a really great way to do a double check to say, am I getting enough fiber? maybe not, I can find something different. And then also on that protein part too, right? All right. Now, moving over to a few other ways to think about ways to optimize your fiber intake, aside from reading your labels, of course, but maybe those small switches and those fiber sprinkles I'm talking about. So, for example, maybe you love your classic jasmine white rice. That's a staple for you. You've grown up with it. And by no means is my recommendation to say stop eating white rice. That's not the answer because if I felt that way, I probably wouldn't do it, right? So, here, when we think about just incorporating those sprinkles of fiber, maybe this looks like having your white jasmine rice and pairing it with a little bit of cauliflower rice, really mixing that together and creating your own version of your fried rice at home. That's a simple way to have the food that you love, but also maximize the nutrient density and increase that fiber in a small and subtle way, especially if you're eating as a family. Sometimes we're thinking about children's preferences, and so sneaking some fiber in there and mixing it all together can be a great strategy. We also think about something like granola. Granola adds a really nice texture to our yogurt bowls and it gives us that nice crunch, but maybe it's not always the best balance when it comes to the fiber, protein, and sugar ratio. So maybe we look to something like chia seeds, our soluble fiber superhero. That can put a really nice crunch and texture to your yogurt, but it's really not giving us any added sugar. It's also giving you some sneaky protein. So another double win there. And maybe you decide to do both. Same thing for something like croutons, swapping that out for maybe some roasted garbanzo beans or roasted edamame, a nice way to maintain that crunchiness and maybe that saltiness you're looking for, but in a way that packs a little bit more fiber. And then lastly, maybe in place of potato chips, we switch over to something like some air pop popcorn, which if anyone knows of the little small snack bag brand, the Lesser Evil brand, it's about 50 calories for this little bag, but it gives us 4 grams of fiber. Who doesn't love that, right? So just thinking about these little small switches that can really start to add up. Okay, hopefully we're doing okay with the fiber piece, right? All right. And then moving on to the third part of the big three. So we've checked off protein, we've checked off our fiber, and we can't forget about hydration. Hydration is probably one of the biggest things we often push to the side. We don't think about it. Our bodies are made of 60% of water, but we often forget how important that water consumption truly is. We're often so food focused that we don't really think about hydration. And so hydration is incredibly important because, especially if you are having lots of protein and lots of fiber, you need something to help move along all of your nutrients within your digestive tract. And so it's really going to be helpful for aiding digestion or alleviating constipation. We might have that fiber component there, but what about the hydration, right? It also is really helpful for regulating your body temperature, especially if you are someone who is physically active and engaging in activity that results in lots of sweat loss. Helping to replenish those hydration stores is going to be really important for that. It's also great for supporting our cognition. And maybe all of us have noticed this at one point or another, but around like that 2 to 3 o'clock p.m. time in the afternoon, where maybe you're feeling a little sluggish, like you need a little bit of a pick-me-up. We often think of what first? Probably food, right? But maybe that's a great moment to say, when is the last time I drank water? And that's something I definitely do myself because I catch myself wanting to go snack, but really maybe not having had enough fluid for the day. And so oftentimes when you're feeling low energy, having a hard time focusing, even mild dehydration can cause that shift in your overall ability to keep concentrated, focus on what you're doing. And that's really important for so many of us throughout the day, right? Whether we're working, we're seeing patients, we're driving in the car, we're managing children, whatever that looks like, right? So that's definitely something to think about. And last but not least, joint and muscle health. It really provides a nice cushion. So especially if you're noticing maybe that arthritis is starting to kick in, you feel a little bit more stiff, definitely hydrating really well is going to help with that. Now, how much hydration? So generally speaking, around 8 to 10 cups a day is a really great goal. And maybe as I'm saying that, you're starting to think, I don't even know how much I drink. And that's probably one of the most challenging questions I typically ask when I'm working with someone, because thinking about what you drink throughout the day, what counts towards your hydration, it can be a bit of a challenge. And so maybe for you, it's just starting to take a look at, what do I drink throughout the day? And starting to make note of that and then working up towards that 8 to 10 cups per day goal, right? And we have lots of options when it comes to hydration. It doesn't just have to be water, but as you can see, as some of these suggestions here, we have water, of course, but we also have broth. So that's a great way to maybe, especially in the colder months, or if you don't enjoy cold water, having a warm fluid, that also can be a nice way to get a savory flavor rather than maybe a more neutral flavor from water. Broth can be a great way to contribute to your fluid intake. We also can have carbonation or bubbles. Sparkling waters are quite fun. We also have teas, coffees, other sugar-free sports drinks. All of those can contribute to your overall 8 to 10 cups a day goal. Now, it doesn't stop there. It doesn't just have to be what you drink, but you actually naturally get hydration from your fruits and vegetables. So things that hold a lot of water are going to be things like watermelon, cucumbers, lemons, pickles, jicama. Those can be really nice ways to get hydration without even realizing it. And if you're still not sure if what you're drinking is working for you and based on what you're typically consuming, I want you to think of this glass of lemonade you see here on the screen. This is kind of what color your urine should be looking like. That's always a really great test to see how hydrated you are. You don't want it to be super strong and odorous. You kind of want it to have this pale, lightish color. And you don't want it to be absolutely clear. That might be too much hydration. You don't want it to be amber or on the darker side. Kind of visualizing this. I know this looks really refreshing and whatnot, so maybe not exactly what you're trying to think about as you are hydrating, but this gives you a nice little eyeball reference as far as what you should be thinking about for your hydration. Now, as I mentioned, hydration is super challenging, right? So we need to make it fun, especially when it comes to anything habit related, healthy habits, making these lifestyle changes. If it's not fun or interesting, we're probably not going to do it, right? So the more fun we can have, the better. So I have some suggestions here or some gadgets you can look into. So I'm not sure if how many people have heard of the Hydrate Spark. Has anyone heard of that before? You can press your little hand emoji to raise your hand if you have heard of that before. Oh, yeah, we got one, got two, three. Yep, we love it. Four. Oh, so many of you. You know all about the hydration gadgets. And so this is really fun because that glowing piece on the bottom, that's actually when that lights up, that's reminding you to drink. And so that's often something I hear from most people is, Gina, I have my water, I have other beverages right next to me at my desk. I take it everywhere I go, but there's nothing reminding me. I even look at it and I don't even think about it. So just like we respond when we get a ping maybe on Jabber or Teams or we get a text message incoming, that water bottle is acting the same exact way. So this is a really great option. It also connects with an app that you can have on your phone to track your water consumption. So it's just a really nice way to fine tune things. And this is excellent if you love data. Now, I know some of you may not want to invest in a super fancy water bottle like this, but maybe just having a water bottle you enjoy drinking out of, that can also be a really great step. And maybe temperature is really important. So if you like something really cold, investing in an insulated water bottle, or you love to have lots of ice and that encourages you to drink, thinking about what really works for you and having that available, that access really goes a long way. Now, there's other tracking apps out there as far as hydration goes. And so I have this fun little multicolored llama here. So Water Llama is a popular hydration tracking app. So you could download something for free like that on your Apple or Android phone, whatever you have. There's also Hydro Coach, Water Minder, so many different apps out there, but we don't have to use an app. We simply could take a piece of paper and a pen and start to keep track of that. Maybe you often put that right next to where you fill up with the water cooler, whether that's at home, at work, whatever that looks like. So there's lots of different ways we can start thinking about hydration to really make it work for you. And I have a fun little image here that you can see. So it's someone who's on a Zoom meeting saying, I suppose I could just send you an email. And so this is where I like to think of a new drinking game. So many of us are working remotely, connecting with people virtually, and this could be a great opportunity to make the most of our hydration. And so, for example, if we were in a Zoom meeting with this individual and they were saying, I suppose I could send you an email, that's our cue. Every time we hear someone say, I'll just send you an email, that's our cue to drink. And so it's really kind of making the mundane and simple parts of our day a little bit more exciting and more intentional, especially when it comes to hydration. So maybe not might not be the drinking games we thought about once upon a time, but I definitely can say from experience it works really, really well. And think about common phrases like, I'll take it offline, or let's set up the next meeting, or someone mentions Zoom or Outlook, whatever that might be, you can really use that to your advantage. Okay. And as we start to wrap things up, I want you to start thinking about that protein, that fiber, and that hydration. Now that we've talked about all of the benefits, all the different things you're thinking about it and ways to incorporate it, we're putting it all together here. So, how do we do that, right? Instead of being focused on just protein alone or fiber or hydration, let's put it together. And this is where I encourage you when you're building your plates and your meals to start thinking about how you can combine all of it. And so this is a really simple idea of ways to think about it. So a Mediterranean quinoa salad. When we're thinking about this, this really incorporates all three aspects and maybe not in the most conventional way. So when we break this down, we have our protein idea. So in this salad, we're getting things like quinoa, which yes, it is a whole grain, but it does have that protein content. That'd be considered a plant-based protein. We also have beans, another one of our great plant-based proteins. And then we added some feta cheese in there. And cheese is going to be another one of our proteins as well. So that's kind of checking off that box for us. Additionally, we have our fiber. And so this is where you can also see that multiple foods can fit multiple categories. And so that's also pretty dang cool. So here for fiber, you can see beans, quinoa. Yes, that's checking off the fiber component. We're also adding in things like cucumbers, tomatoes. We're also adding in fiber from avocado, our red onion. So lots of ways that we're adding in that fiber component. And last but not least, we're also using things that help to hydrate us. So cucumbers are thrown in there and then a little bit of lemon juice when we toss everything together. And so rather than making things stressful and thinking about what I shouldn't have and what I need to restrict to meet my goals, maybe this is a way to kind of think about it, that how do I have these mixed meals of the big three where I really pack a protein punch, a fiber sprinkle, and then add some hydration, whether that's to the meal or on the side. And hopefully that's got you all thinking now. It looks delicious. I know I'm getting hungry just as we talk about it. Okay, and to wrap things up, hopefully you are feeling a little bit more informed and motivated and inspired to incorporate something that is a little bit more challenging for you. But now that you've heard all of that, I'd love to hear which of the big three do you feel more confident about? And I'm going to give you some time to, again, pull out those cameras, open up that camera app or those cell phones, click on that link, and let's give us some time to fill out our poll. All right, hopefully we're putting all of our answers in. Okay, maybe 5 more seconds. Are we feeling more confident about protein, fiber, hydration, all of the above? All right, and we'll move on. Oh, we'll wait for that to load. Oh, maybe we're counting down now. Oh, now all of them are coming in. Okay, here we go. Almost there. Okay, we're getting close. If you haven't already done it, we have 7 seconds left. All right, let's see. Hopefully we'll get our results here. Well, I'm hoping you put all of them. I think that's what our OG goal here is, to really make sure that we're feeling more confident about all of them. And even if you still have questions and you feel like you want more details, that's okay. Oh, there we go. This is just the beginning, right? When we think about where we're starting in our health journeys, but yay, 50% all of them. That means I did my job well as far as helping you to gain a little bit better insight into the big three. But I'm glad to see that most of them shifted down and we've moved on to all of them. And so I hope from today you walk away thinking more about how to incorporate the big three into your day to day, the importance and benefit, not just from your one specific goal of maybe lowering your A1C or building muscle or losing weight or, making your cardiologist proud. I really want you to think about what we can do to help ourselves just be and feel healthier. That's really the goal here. And not only that, but to extend our lifespan, help anything we can do to promote the best longevity as possible. All right, and thank you for coming for today. We're going to get started with the Q&A in just a few moments, but this is your reminder. If you love today, or even if you thought today was okay and you want to see more presentations over the next couple months, this is your reminder to go ahead and scan that QR code and register for the upcoming webinars with all of my colleagues who are fantastic. That will be April 16th, same time, same place. And with that, we'll go ahead and kick things off with the Q&A section.
Well, thank you, Gina, so much for that engaging and informative talk. We have, of course, a lot of questions pending. The first one I will go ahead and answer for you is the slides will be posted on the Stanford Health Library or available for you to review later. And one of the first questions that came up was about insoluble and soluble fiber. Excuse me one moment. So let me scroll all the way back to see what that question specifically was about. When considering fiber for heart health, does soluble or insoluble fiber matter? Is either one more beneficial for the heart?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I would say in general, just consuming an adequate amount of fiber is going to be helpful to just prioritizing those types of foods on your plate to help promote heart health. Insoluble fiber, it does a little bit better of a job as far as helping to remove that cholesterol and extract it out of the body to help with lowering cholesterol. But I would say rather than focusing on just that one specific form of fiber, as far as something like whole grains, your nuts and seeds, beans, things like that, I would say just have variety. And that's really the way to go, because when you increase that variety, that's also going to just give you both kinds, and oftentimes different foods can also be both. So I would say don't focus or worry too much about specific types and just really think about fiber as a whole, and you'll be just fine. Yeah, really good question.
Another question came up whether food counted towards hydration in water.
So does food count towards hydration?
Yes, excuse me, apologize. Fresh fruits and vegetables that have high water content.
Definitely. So just like we were mentioning, so things like lemons, cucumbers, citrus, watermelon, a lot of our other leafy greens that contain water, that does contribute towards your overall fluid intake for the day. A lot of us surprisingly get a good amount of that from our fluid intake, but again, we'd have to really maybe be tracking that diligently. So it's more just us to be aware of that you are getting some hydration from your fruits and veggies. So as you incorporate that, just know that that is contributing to your overall hydration goal of the 8 to 10 cups a day.
Does it matter when during the day you eat your protein, fiber, and hydrate?
Oh, such a good question. There's lots of controversy around when you should eat your protein fiber, and when the best timing for that is. I often say having a structured amount of protein and fiber throughout the day is actually the key. Oftentimes, just fueling consistently, I typically recommend eating at least every 3 to 4 hours to make sure you're getting enough fuel, with a goal of maybe 4 to 6 small meals, depending on what works best for you. But starting the day with protein and fiber is actually incredibly important, especially if you notice that maybe you're often grabbing something as you head out the door, and that might be a little bit carbohydrate dense. For example, something like a bagel or some oatmeal or some toast. Sure, that'll give you that quick energy, but it's not providing you that long lasting energy like protein and fiber does. And so there's actually a lot of studies and research to show when we start the day with 20 to 30 grams of protein, that's not only going to help keep us full in the moment, but it helps us kind of bridge the gap a little bit longer until we can fuel at the next part of our day. And they've actually also found that having a stronger amount of protein front loaded earlier in the day is going to help avoid those snacking habits that can start to trickle in maybe around 3 to 4 o'clock or even the evening. So I like to say start your day with protein and fiber and have that be present at every meal. But if you're really going to make a strong effort, I would say earlier in the day to get a good amount of protein and fiber is really ideal. And hydration is good all the time. The only thing I would say about hydration is you want to be thoughtful about not hydrating too late, or you'll probably be waking up to pee during the middle of the night, and that's not always very fun. So I would say if you can try to focus on hydration first, that can be a really great way to think about it too. Such great questions, all of you.
There were a lot of questions about different types of protein supplements, and I'm very excited to hear the interest about that because in our next session, we're going to be talking all about protein supplements. So please join us for that, for the answers to your questions next time.
Yeah, Shirley and I are protein supplement experts. That's probably what we talk about all day long because we often are big supporters of that and find it incredibly useful. So come back for Protein in Palooza in April. So we'll definitely talk more about good quality options, where you can find them, things to look for as far as protein, sugar, carbohydrate content. And that'll be so much fun to have you all back.
And it looks like we are close to the end of our session today. The slides will be posted, and as will the recorded webinar be available for you to access later on the Stanford Health Library and the YouTube channel as well. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, everyone.